Welcome to the Layman's Seminary. Today we're continuing our series on debate preparation from an upcoming debate with Turretinfan, the guy you see in the screen right here. It's actually in 5 days away instead of 6 days. This is my screenshot from yesterday. So what we're going to be doing in this video is we're going to focus on one passage really, Philippians 1:6. Okay. I hope tomorrow to get to Philippians 2. And then I also want to eventually get to the author and the finisher of faith, but a passage from Hebrews. But I the question I want y'all to think about as we're going through this is, would you build the doctrine of perseverance of the saints off of this passage? That's the question I would ask. And not saying it's built only off of this. There's a matrix of passages, but this is one of the ones that is often brought up. So let's go forward. So as I've said before, last night in the video that I made, I studied this debate a lot, and because Josh Gibbs, he's free grace, Francis Turretin or Turretinfan, he debated on the same topic, perseverance. This is a theological debate, but we want to move things to the exegetical area, which probably means in the future there will be a more narrow, specific debate. Okay, so my approach to it, it's kind of like what I just said. I went over this last time. My thesis is no positionally saved people are eternally preserved, even if they don't temporally persevere. He believes that people have to temporally persevere or they're not saved. I believe we can't fall away from the eternal realm, but we can fall away from the temporal realm. I did a summary of Turretinfan's opening. He gave the Westminster Confession of Faith 3 points, and I analyzed in the last video those passages. He said they may backslide but not fall away. That's his main assertion. He gave scripture proof using the King James in 16 passages / pericopes, and I ran them through the chart. Well, there's my chart. Y'all are familiar with that. Okay, so before we begin, some of the things that I'm going to be talking about, methods and procedures. I've used this book several times. I think the first time I encountered it and I read it was in 2008, but I've had it for seminary classes and things like that. So it's a good book to have. In this particular chapter, for sentence diagram and clausal layouts and exegetical line and tracing the argument is going to be relevant to this video. Okay, what you see right here, this is actually from my outline series, my outlines that I was making for my survey class that I just completed except for the paper. And this is mine on Philippians. I don't have a video for Philippians yet. I'll have to make one. Things have just been real hectic. And but so there's this. There's the outline of the book. My point is that I already have an outline of the book, and when I did the outline of the book, this is tentative and preliminary, but I actually did this based on my prior understanding from Advanced Greek 1 whenever we did the whole book of Philippians and doing what are called clausal layouts and making exegetical outlines. So that helped feed my understanding of the argument for the book. Okay, but I do have this video, quick inductive Bible study of Philippians 1 through 11, phrasing. I think this is one I did with my wife. You can go through here and see how we did the method. And here's the actual document. I got it screenshotted. You have things phrased. There's the passage we're talking about. 4, I'm confident of this very thing. They begin to go work in you. I'm not going to really be explaining the verse too much. I'm just trying to expose y'all to the difficulty that is associated with this passage. Okay. There's my clausal layouts that I actually did for Advanced Greek 1. There's our 6 right here. Here's my exegetical outline at that time, my subject complements. So that at that time, I said my exegetical idea is Paul praises God for the Philippians' participation in ministry and for their mutual affection and for the growth in God's glory. So 3 ideas. Paul gives thanks to God for the Philippian Christians because of their participation in ministry and God's working in them collectively and individually, 3-6. And then I have this: the time Paul gives thanks is when he remembers them and prays. The prayer Paul gives thanks for is with joy. The reason Paul is joy is because of his affectionate dedication of Paul's ministry that he knows God will complete before Christ returns. And then there's two sub reasons. Read Paul's praise because of participation in the ministry from that time they first met Paul. And Paul's joy because he's confident God will complete the good work in light of Christ's return. Okay, that's the main focus here. So as I'm going through this Philippians 1:6, of course, one of the things that I typically do is I go to the most recent commentary that's out and that's trusted, that's updated every year, and I begin here. Okay. And if I know that this is 2022. So I already know that every year it's going to be updated, recent. So actually what I do is I go to bestcommentary.com and I put it on recent, and then I look at the other resources. Then I start going through which ones do I have in Logos, which ones do I have access to in some type of format and things like that. And I start walking through them in that way. This is Constable's Notes because it was the most recent for 2022. There was a few others that came out that same year. So he's talking about justification, sanctification, and glorification concerning this. And he says, what was the good work to which Paul referred in this verse? If he had in mind only the generosity of the original readers, he may have meant that good work. However, as I have suggested, he seems to have had a much broader concept in mind, namely what the work of God gospel produces, namely salvation. Who is he who began a good work of salvation? It can only be God. Paul was confident that God will complete what he had begun in his beloved Philippians. Okay, so that's his argument, and it actually, I'm not there with him. Not on this particular issue. I used to be, but it's not where I'm at right now. I'll just say that up front. But it's not a big deal, but it's a big deal for this debate. So the aspect of sanctification that Paul had in view of verse 5, was that Philippians' partnership with him in the work of propagating the gospel. And see, he's quoting Paul right here, whenever he's mentioning this, effective partners. And so I do agree with this part. Then he quotes Charles Hodges right here, who says, although sanctification does not exclude all cooperation on the part of its subjects, but on the contrary calls for their unremitting and strenuous exertion, it is nevertheless the work of God. So this is that tension that, okay, if salvation is monogenistic in every single way, then why is there a synergistic element, and how do you explain that? That's not the purpose of our debate. But it does relate to perseverance to some extent. Excuse me, I gotta drink some water for my throat. I'll go ahead and say this. Someone that was watching the video out there, I'm gonna keep them anonymous until they give me permission. But they blessed Shannon and I by donating to the Layman Seminary, and we really appreciate that because Christmas is pretty tough because the plant wherever I work shuts down early, things like that. But anyway, my mind just drifted to that because I was thinking about my throat when I'm drinking the water. But I pray that person is blessed. Anyway, so Constable, of course, does not believe in perseverance of the saints. He's a moderate. You could call him a moderate Calvinist, or you could call him free grace. He calls himself free grace. He's what someone is more conservative free grace. But regardless of that, Dallas Theological Seminary, heavyweight in that sense. But he makes his arguments and quotes other people for why this doesn't refer to perseverance. Before the debate begins, I'll probably read some of that. Right now, that's not what my intention was to make in this PowerPoint. It's to expose y'all to stuff, for y'all to study. And I just want y'all to see the complexity that's involved here. but he's got arguments against why it doesn't refute perseverance or doesn't support perseverance, regardless of how you take it, whether it's for salvation or a certain aspect of salvation, such as sanctification, or if it's just referring to the participation. So, basically, the other thing that I do whenever I'm reading Constable's notes is I always look at the resources that are quoted, and that's why I go research. He quotes Bing right here from the 1991 thing. I'm going to quote some Bing in a little bit, but Bing wrote an article, Does Philippians 1:6 Teach Perseverance? But before that, here's Charles Hodges. Whenever somebody quotes something, I try to go back and look at the resource and see if and highlight it. I may not be able to study it all in context and everything, but I at least marked it. I'm aware of it. I can go back and study it. It's frame of reference. I can get deeper. But I'm just trying to see, okay, this person's quoting this person, so let me record that. Let's see if I see any initial discrepancies, there's any problems with the quote, something like that, before I ended up repeating some information that could be wrong or something like that. But so this is that quote that Constable gave. Now the next thing I did is I just typed in Philippians 1:6 free grace theology. So I got an idea of the commentaries that are out there. I looked at the ones that I had after I had already shared my own stuff. I recently, when was it, 2021 is whenever I took Advanced Greek 1, so I went on Philippians through that. So I was like, okay, let me just see what comes up. And one of the articles is from 2017. This one is from 2006, but this is 2017. And that is, what is Philippians 1:6 saying? And you read it, and Welcome basically narrows it down. And he says, I recommend you go read this article by John Hart, a Moody Bible. He says, does Philippians 1:6 guarantee progressive sanctification, part 1 and 2? And he makes his arguments for that. Now, here's Bing's book, Grace, Salvation, and Discipleship, that made famous the 8 truth and the be truth thing. And this is what he says. God will complete his work. All right. A truth interpretation is God will complete his work in Christians of persevering in faith and good works to the end of their lives. B truth interpretation is God will work the seed that the Philippians' good work of giving will be completed. So it's about their good work of giving will be completed. All right. And he goes into his discussion of why he takes the particular view that he does. I'm probably going to read that and look at it, and see what he says a little bit more detail, but I just didn't feel like it needed to be preserved in here. I'm just exposing y'all to this to show y'all that, when you're dealing with the free grace debate, and I'm noticing he's using A truth a little bit different here, because this almost sounds like the Calvinistic interpretation. And so I use A truth as position and B truth as this. So I may have to modify how I explain things. Then I was like, okay, Dillo, I think, wrote in 2018, the most recent 4th edition, does he talk about Philippians 1:6? And I found a quote right here in one of the footnotes. The work that God will complete in the lives of the Philippians is not sanctification, but their participation in the gospel with them, which will continue up to the Lord's return. Paul expected the Lord to return in his lifetime. That's how Dillo's taking it according to this quote. So he's not taking it even to refer to experiential sanctification, but rather participation in the gospel, that God will continue the work. So a defense of free grace theology, I'm like, okay, let's go ahead and let's keep on going down through here, and let's see what other free grace articulations have mentioned about Philippians. And we're going to go into other commentaries. Like I said, following the best commentaries, but this is the pattern I'm going right now. So this is Ken Wilson being quoted here. Turretinfan is doing a whole examination of Ken Wilson's stuff. He probably knows Ken Wilson stuff better than me. I've only read the Heresy of GES book by him, and I have the Augustinian book, but I haven't read it. Just reference it, I think, but I haven't read it. So, he may say, well, he was wrong about that, or, that's fine. It'll make for interesting conversation. So right here, he's talking about Augustine, or Augustine, however you want to say it. And it says, therefore, a person could be genuinely regenerated, receive the Holy Spirit, but be damned to hell by not receiving the additional necessary gift of perseverance, which was awesomely exclaimed as stupefying. He reverts to the Gnostic Manichaean interpretation in Romans 11:33. Augustine then conscripts Philippians 1:6 as a proof text completely out of context of Paul's confidence that the Philippians will continue their partner fellowship and gospel through the financial contributions to him. And there's a footnote. So here's the footnote, and the footnote kind of weirdly brought me to David Allen Black's book. Nice guy. I met him at ETS, the regional one, and we used his grammar in Turbo Greek, linguistics for students, New Testament Greek, and so we have that resource being quoted there. And it says, compare 4:10, where the concluding work of financial support matches the beginning 1:5 of fellowship in the gospel. So how the book ends matches how the book begins is what that's being said. This is the book by Black, Linguistics for Students in New Testament Greek. And so just real summary, looking at this, I look at the beginning of the paragraph, it says, and determining the theme of the paragraph. So he's writing about the theme, and he's doing all the koinonia stuff. That's the participation word or fellowship word. And then so I come down here, and an important expression of Christianity appears not only in the body opening, but also in the body closing. This relates to the main argument. So it seems that Black is being quoted here to support the connection with the financial contribution and all that. All right, so the Augustinian quote is from this resource right here. And I'm just looking at it. This is 19. I see the statement, without respect to the merits of free will. I'm skimming this. This is talking about infant baptism. Here's words about not persevering good and things like that. I'm like, okay, I'm aware of it. Not really interested in Augustine right now. Let's move forward. What's interesting is this is in April 21st, 2021. This is Dr. Michael Svigel. And he posted this. We follow each other on Twitter, you know. He's a DTS guy. He wrote a theology book, three volume one with Nathan Holstein, one of the professors I had for systematic theology. And so he asked this question. He says, what if the plural passive command in Ephesians 5:18, y'all be filled with the Spirit, is to be realized corporately, not individually, by being fully immersed in the sphere in which the Spirit primarily operates church. Okay, so he's thinking about the corporate idea, right? And so I replied, it's a possibility I have not considered before. Thanks. If that be correct, then how would you take the adverbial participles following the main verb? This is the anytime you're taking intermediate Greek or advanced Greek, we ask these questions like, how do you take this verb? How do you take this? And so he put instrument question mark. That means the means by which spirit is manifested corporately by mutual deference and exercising one another, right? And my point is not to argue for his interpretation, but Michael Svigel is Reformed. He's Calvinistic, okay? And you'll see why this is important in a minute. So here we're having this discussion about Greek. Some other people get in, and you know, we're talking and everything. And then this is April 23rd. Which one was this? That was the 21st. So this is a couple of days later, the 2021. Following Christ's radical obedience exemplified in Philippians 2:6-11 is impossible for us. That's why we have Philippians 2:12-13. I'm like, okay, well, he's taken a corporate thing before. He's knowledgeable in Greek, so I'm going to ask him a question. I say, what do you think about the possibility that this passage is similar to the Ephesians Philip passage you mentioned, and Philippians 1:6, in light of their participation in ministry and offering that they are raising? So this is his reply. Yeah, if I were Armenian, I'd interpret the God working in you corporately as God's working among y'all. But I'm a Calvinist, but a kind, gentle one, so I don't read it that way. And you know, there's a couple things to think about here. Number one, he's basically saying, I'm a Calvinist, I'm a kind, gentle one. The point being is that there are people that I respect. I'm in academia, okay? I don't know if I'll ever get a doctorate or anything like that, you know. But I'm in academia. That means I have to study all the people that have something to contribute on a particular issue, regardless of their background. You know, I respect them. I appreciate them in certain areas. A lot to respect. Somebody from Dallas Seminary. I mean, I'm nobody, you know, in that sense. But here seems to be saying, don't freak out that I'm a Calvinist, you know, because you know you got cage stage Calvinists and you got cage stage free grace and things like that. But he didn't argue against the Arminian interpretation of the passage. Now, is the Ephesians interpretation of 5:18 an Arminian interpretation? It could be, but I just take of it as a corporate or collective idea. Yeah, sometimes Arminian use that argument, but so it was just interesting because he said, I don't read it that way. And it's true that whenever we're reading scripture, we're reading it in light of our pre-understanding. Our goal is to get be exegetical, discover things new from the text, be careful with the text, don't jump to conclusions, all of that. But we all have our glasses, we all have our theology, and what we see in the text should correct that. But the reality is that you at this time I was hoping to get a little bit more, and maybe I'll explore this in the future. And the reason I'm sharing this with y'all is because I want y'all to know that I do try to seek answers on these things. I'm not just trying to look for a proof text to win a debate. Of course, this is 2021. You know, we're almost in 2023 now. But hope y'all understand the relevance of why I was sharing that. Okay. Had a blank slide. That's all right. So one of the more recent commentaries that came out, I like Benjamin Merkel for his Greek and all of that stuff. I'm not a fan of this commentary except for the exegetical outlines that are at the beginning. The outlines are pretty good in the sense that they are at this Greek sentence level. So when I was making my outlines for my survey class, I would make them at the paragraph level and then divide them by the Greek sentence level. And then, you know, I would notice, and it's kind of interesting, is you can see where people make some outlines make it at chapter levels and paragraph levels and sentence or clause or whatever. And you can see where they're doing that. And so I'm like, okay, I can see that this commentary likes to make those outlines at the Greek sentence level. And I appreciate that. And I think, yeah, Merkel's done some of the exegetical New Testament guides and things like that. He's the one that done the intermediate Greek with Plummer and is it Kostenberger? I think so. So good scholarship. Probably don't agree with him on a lot of things. He's got a book on dispensationalism, I think I was reading. But regardless of that, this is what that commentary says. What is the good work that God began and will complete? It is the entire work of salvation. Now, when I mean entire work of salvation, they're talking about justification, sanctification, glorification, or position, experience, and ultimate. Okay? There's a footnote here. We'll look at it in a minute. And it says, since salvation did not begin with the will of man, Philippians 1:29, it follows that its completion cannot decisively depend upon the power of man. The God-centered nature of salvation is good news because man is fickle, but God is faithful to finish what he starts. God's work will come to full completion at the day of Jesus Christ. Paul's focus on the day of Jesus Christ fills Philippians with a pervasive hope of glory. Okay, so now we're going to look at this footnote. Some argue that the good work is Paul's financial partnership with the Philippians. It says C. Gerald Hawthorne and Ralph Martin. This is the Word Biblical Commentary, and this is 2004. And then it says O'Brien. This is the plagiarized one, I think. Makes a much better case, and I still like it. It's just you can't use it for writing your papers, sadly. But it's a great commentary. It makes a much better case for the view that the good work refers to salvation. Okay, and actually, yeah, the 1991. So this is a newer work, but they thought O'Brien was more convincing. Okay, and that may be the case, and that may be something to explore. I could also pull out the SIL exegetical summaries and narrow everything down. But this is 2017, 2018. This is Mark Keown. I think that's how you say it. Evangelical exegetical commentary. And I don't know what his theological position is, but I do know who Todd Skasewater is of Exegetical Tools. And he gives a review of the commentary right here. And you can go there and look. So this is what that commentary says about Philippians 1:6. Most English readers in the New Testament, many interpreters read this as a wonderful assurance of God's bringing to completion the good work of salvation he began in them. And so it gives a list of all the commentaries that argue that way, right? And you can guess that they're either Calvinistic or they're Arminian, right? I mean, what else is there? Free grace. But anyway. So he gives a number of arguments supporting this. All right. My goal was not to go into the arguments. I could write a whole paper on this, and I have a short time. 5 days left. Wait. Yeah, 5 days, I think. That's what it is. Anyway, the alternative view is that Paul is not speaking of the good works of salvation, but is continuing a thought of 1:5 about the participation. So you got early as Lightfoot right here, Ellicott, a lot of these others, mention the views and stuff. So it says that is the good work is the participation in the gospel. So this is my point. I'm showing y'all that my argument for Philippians 1:6 or the possibility of it, it's not something made up by free grace. This stuff has been in scholarship, it's been in commentaries, and it is disputed. So the question is, are you basing, or is this one of the passages you're basing your theology on whenever there's other options, This is the good work of the participation gospel, and it is this that God will complete through to the day of Christ. These are also good reasons for taking it that way. So this is the alternate view, right? And he gives a list of those. Now this is interesting, this chart that he gives. He goes through and he deals with the structure of Philippians 1:5, Philippians 6:7, and Philippians 7:8. And so what you have is you have a statement of the gospel involvement, right? There are partnerships in the gospel. He who began a good work through you in the defense and confirmation of the gospel. You are joint partners in my grace. So you have a statement of the gospel involvement. Then you have a subordinate temporal contextual clause. In other words, from the first day until now, we're bringing to complete the future day Christ in my present change and in the present defense establishment of the gospel. So you got a statement of the gospel's involvement, then you got a time indicator. Pauline expression of emotion and conviction, being convinced of. So it is right for me to think this way about y'all because I hold you in my heart. For God is my witness that I long for you with the affection of Christ Jesus. So he's an emotional, so you're seeing that structure. But this is what Keown says. I hope I'm saying that right. While it is very appealing then to argue that Paul here is speaking generally of salvation, like the first option, this analysis suggests that it's more likely that Paul is speaking primarily of the participation in the gospel and especially God's mission. Okay, let me come back to this. So this is the point. This commentary is 2017, I think. This most recent, one of the more recent ones, ESV commentary, I think 2018. they're appealing, even though it's a 2004, they don't agree with the 2004 arguments. We're not convinced by it, and they hang by O'Brien's 1991 arguments. So, all right. And then this is 2017. So I'm just showing y'all that I'm glad this commentary was made, because it's intensively Greek exegetical syntax and all of that type of stuff. So that's cool. But let me read this. Paul assures the Philippians that he believes that God will bring this mission to completion right up until the day of Christ, i.e., the completion of the new creation. I'm not sure what he means by new creation, but this could be just a reference to the idea that God is going to continue to work until the removal of the church. I want to call that new creation, fullness of Gentiles. I don't know. I think right now, I mean, other people argue that it's talking about the judgment seat of Christ, which does happen at the rapture if you're pre-trib. But this makes sense in light of the challenges the Philippians are facing. Paul is expressing his profound confidence that they will be okay and that the mission will be completed. God's purpose cannot be thwarted. His situation in Rome ironically and rhetorically reinforces this point, despite the apostle to the Gentiles being imprisoned and the opposition to him within the Roman church. The advance of the gospel to the Gentiles cannot be stopped, for the word of God cannot be bound. So there you have it. So the idea is it's not saying that this is a guarantee that the individual is going to persevere to the end. It's saying that God is going to continue his mission of evangelizing people, of saving people until Christ comes back. And in context, I think it relates to the offering, the mission offering. This is all motivating factors that Paul's using to motivate them to give the offering that's in chapter 4. Okay, so Keon does say this in a footnote. Alternatively, both ideas are in mind. However, this analysis shows that the emphasis is on the mission dynamic rather than salvation. Okay. And that's it. The rest of the stuff we went through last time. So if you were blessed by this video, subscribe. Hit the bell if you want notifications. Give us a thumbs up. Help with the algorithm purpose. Yeah. And share this with others. Let us know what you think. Keep this ministry in prayer. Thank you for praying for our health and helping in the ways that I mentioned. And let's see what else. Oh, and you might see the link underneath my videos more often now if you want to donate that way. I thought that I had set it up that way, but for my trailer video, but I was told by the person that let me, said send them the link, that it wasn't there. So, well, my throat's dry, so I'm gonna let it fly. God bless.